Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to introduce you to some of the nuts and bolts to setting up a low ropes course. So today I'm going to introduce you to some of the parts. First of all, most of the courses are set up with 3/8 inch aircraft carrier cable, and um, you inspect it to make sure that it hasn't been damaged or kinked in any way. And there's probably two that you'll be aware of. Some courses, say at Cortland State's Outdoor Education Center, that's a permanent site. They stay up year round, and so you have to inspect it all the time. Um, Before you ever go on a course, it's your obligation and responsibility to check the course each time. So you're checking the cables. In an urban setting, or where there's more traffic, say at the TC3 course, you have to put it up and take it down each day. So the cable, you need to be aware how the cable's stretched out so it doesn't have kinks. And what this is a strand vise. So the way a strand vise works, the cable actually goes through right here, and then it'll automatically lock down. And then you'll need, when the cable's sticking out here, you'll need some of these cable clamps, at least two. Even though it's made, it won't come out because of the vise action that it has when it gets pulled in here. Safety guidelines, they want two um, cable clamps, and that way you can judge to see if there's any movement in it when you have a load on it. Once you have this, you'll have these eye bolts go through the tree, or they'll go through a pressure treated telephone pole that's anchored into the ground. And they'll have a bolt on it. And then you'll have three, you may have a washer that goes over this, and you may have a fish plate. A fish plate is a little bit larger because it's butted up against a pole or a tree, and it'll keep less resistance. And this plate you can see is even bigger. It's called a tuna plate, so that's even bigger for to keep the bolts from growing in and pulling in. Where did my notes go? They flew off into the woods. Once these attachments, these will be attached into the tree or the telephone pole. You may have a eye bolt coming out through as your attachment. You may have a strand vise coming out that the cable has run around the tree or the pole, and that's where the cable, you'll have a turnbuckle, and there's two types of turnbuckles. One would have a hook and a hook on the end, or one would have an eye bolt and a hook. So with the eye bolt, this would probably be permanently attached around the eye. But what they would do is they would attach, you would have a thimble. This is a thimble. This just keeps the cable from wearing. So if the thimble is right here, the cable goes around the thimble as so, and then you'll clamp that down with your cable clamps, and you'll have three cable clamps clamped down, and you'll check those cable clamps. You'll check those cable clamps to make sure that they're screwed down properly, and there's three of them, and there hasn't been any slippage on the cable. So once you have the cable, if it's a course like TC3 where you have to set it up, you'll have a hook, a turnbuckle, hooked to this, which is hooked to the cable. The cable is going to be in here, and it'll be attached to the course. And you'll have the other one that may be attached you'll have to attach it to the eye bolt. And then once you get that, you'll have to tighten it up. And one side will go and the other side goes at the same time. So you probably have to have something to keep this from spinning as you're going around and tightening it up. And the amount of pressure that you have, that you don't want to have very much slack in it. So the tighter the rope, the more stable and easier it is for the participants on it. The more slack you have in the rope, you increase the difficulty and challenge when they're walking on the cables. If they're attached, you may have an attachment here. This is called a rapid link. Rapid link is different than a carabiner. Carabiner has a gate in it. That gate makes it a lot weaker than a rapid link that does not have a gate on it. So for all the low ropes attachment, you're going to be using a rapid link. So general rule, screw down, never screw up. And if you're connecting them, you want this screwing down on the bottom, because people will be walking on top of this. And if it was this way, people are walking on top, rubbing it back and forth, it could accidentally get opened or slightly opened. The most important part of this is to make sure that it screws down all the way. You can see this one has been damaged because it won't screw down all the way. That means, see the threads right there? That means whoever was doing it just screwed it over partially. Then when they put a load on it, it actually opened it up a little bit, and it makes it impossible for you to get it screwed down. So you'd probably retire this rapid link and replace it with another one. So that's probably one of the most important lessons that you can learn when you're setting up a ropes course. Make sure on the rapid link you screw it all the way down to the bottom, and you may have to have a wrench with you because once they get down and there's a load on it, very difficult to try to get it unscrewed by hand. So you'd have that. You make sure that you keep them lubricated so they spin down and spin up very easily. So just remember, when you're hooking up a ropes course, you're checking the back end of it, and to make sure that the bolt is covering the threads and that it's tight. Make sure there's no damage on any of these. Make sure that your attachment is secure, that it's not partial on it. It has to be on correctly. Make sure that the cable clamps, that there's 3 of them on the end, 2 at the end of a strand vise, and they're screwed down. Check your cable to make sure it's not kinked in any way. And your rope, if you have a rope attachment to anything, you have to inspect the rope, and usually that's going to be attached to an eye bolt hanging above, and you'd swing it around. Screw down, never screw up. And then that rope's going to be hanging from that attachment, and that's what they're going to be using for any traversing if they have it on cables. So I hope this is helpful, and when we have class this week, we'll review this again, and if you have any questions, make sure you jot it down. We'll cover that in class this week.